Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When the Rebel Alliance shocked the galaxy by destroying the Death Star over Yavin, a small group of desperados suddenly became the sole focus of the entire Galactic Empire's military might. The Emperor sent this most feared enforcer, Darth Vader, along with the newly created task force known as Death Squadron. Vader's personal fleet was centered around a Super Star Destroyer, a ship that had no equal in the galaxy. Now, finding and tracking down and destroying a small mobile group of insurgents is incredibly difficult to do, but up until this point, the Empire hadn't really taken the Rebel threat that seriously. But now things had changed. The sheer amount of resources the Empire was willing to devote to this task made it impossible for the Rebel forces to make port at even the smallest trading outposts. In a recent video, we talked about how important the Viper probe droid was to the Imperial intelligence gathering network. We also talked about Vader's Project Swarm, which deployed 100,000 of these Viper droids to every corner of the galaxy looking for anomalies. Basically, the Empire had a huge amount of ships, men, and eyes on almost every system in the galaxy. And so the Rebels were really in a lot of trouble. Simply put, they could not live in space forever. The Rebels needed their own base of operation where injured personnel could rest and recover, where food supplies and weapons could be replenished. They needed a place for non-combatants to live, like support staff, political prisoners, and the families of fighters. The Rebel High Command also needed a place that was well protected and safe, where they could make plans and figure out what their next move was. And so Mon Mothma made finding a new hidden base, like the one they had on Yavin 4, a major priority. The parameters for this search was actually quite narrow. You wanted a planet that was far away from major hyperspace routes, but also had multiple hyperspace routes going through it to make escape a lot easier if it comes to that. The planet also needed to look dead from outer space and have minimal life forms on it, but enough life forms to sustain an operation for a few hundred to 1,000 people. Ideally, this base should be able to sustain itself. This way, you don't have ships coming in and out of the system constantly resupplying it. Princess Leia was selected for the task of finding this new Rebel base, primarily because her father Bail Organa had organized the early rebellion and already had locations selected around the galaxy for stockpiling weapons and munitions. One of the first planets that Leia visited was actually Crate. There was an old mining operation there that had been abandoned due to a labor dispute. This mine was underground and heavily fortified, making it a perfect place for a clandestine base. There are some subterranean life forms on the planet thanks to the underground water reserves, and on a sunny day, one could even say that Crate seemed pleasant to walk around. But turns out, Princess Leia's contact on the planet had falsified environmental reports, making Crate look a lot more hospitable than it actually was. You see, the planet had these massive salt storms that could flash dry organic life forms within a few minutes if they were caught outside without protection. Leia's contact also informed the Empire, and so Crate gets crossed off this list, although it would come in handy much later on during the First Order Resistance War. Now, shortly after that, the Mon Cala mercantile fleet would mutiny and join the rebellion, bringing with them a large number of Mon Calamari cruisers, which would form the backbone of the Rebel fleet. But again, with no home base, this new fleet was forced to gather around Makota space docks, where they were betrayed by their host, Queen Trios, and ambushed by Darth Vader's Death Squadron. As you can see, the Rebels really needed a base because they were constantly getting betrayed by their hosts or informants who were supposed to be on their side. The Rebels would then attempt to survey the planet of the Lothal Minor, a junk world where trash from all over the galaxy was dumped on. This is actually where Maul found himself after getting cut in half. It was a good place to hide, and there were plenty of spare parts to be found and scavenged. But this was a planet that regularly was visited by outsiders, and there were even hostile locals and scavengers all over the place that presented a security threat. Then they would visit the planet of Bogano. For those of you who played Jedi Fallen Order, Cal Kestis managed to lay low on this planet for a while, around 14 BBY. Bogano is a very peaceful planet with flat grassy plains and canyons and ravines made up of limestone and clay. There are even indigenous tribes there that were quite peaceful. But by the time Leia and the Rebels get there, the Empire already has a presence on the planet, making it a no-go. Eventually, almost 3 months after the Battle of Yavin, the rebellion finally stumbles upon a little-known planet in the Outer Rim territories in the Anote sector known as Hoth. Upon first appearance, this icy cold rock with temperatures that dip well below freezing seemed like the worst choice out of all the planets they visited so far. But if you dig a bit deeper beneath the surface, you'll be surprised by how much life you can find. Like the rebellion, the creatures on Hoth are quite tenacious. Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, ownersaber.com. They make these amazing looking lightsabers. Yes, this is the Black Moon, otherwise known as the Dark Saber in universe. And OwnerSaber.com has an amazing deal for you for the New Year's, and it involves replica sabers just like this. If you buy any replica category saber like the Black Moon, you can get a free Padawan saber of your choice. I do recommend you guys take your time and look through OwnerSaber.com's wide range of lightsabers. They have some really amazing designs from all your favorite characters in the Star Wars galaxy. And I gotta say, the weight and build quality of these metal hilts are fantastic. It's a real joy to hold these things in your hands. If this deal sounds like something you're interested in, simply add both the replica and Padawan saber you want, and at checkout, the discount will be applied automatically. Also, take a look at OwnerSaber.com's New Year's bundle along with all of their newest sabers. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. The planet of Hoth gets its name from perhaps one of the most badass Jedi military leaders in galactic history. His name is Lord Hoth, and he led the Army of Light and commanded Republic and Jedi forces during the horrifying New Sith Wars. Lord Hoth was kind of a different kind of Jedi. He's very different from the prequel Jedi that we are all very well aware of, who, kind of existed in this really peaceful era where all the Jedi wore robes and they didn't necessarily have that much military experience. Now, the Jedi of Lord Hoth's time completely embraced warfare and donned intricate armor and were well versed in battlefield tactics, logistics, and weapon systems. It was a time in which Force users would actually battle each other in epic battles with thousands of lightsabers sung through the air. The complete opposite of the smaller and more personal duels we see in the late Republic era, when the Sith had reduced their numbers to just a handful. And the reason why there are only a handful of Jedi is largely because of Lord Hoth's efforts, and also the efforts of Darth Bane, but that's just another story for another day. But yeah, Lord Hoth was a tough, rough man, just like the planet Hoth. He was a military man. He was able to make tough choices on the battlefield and sacrifice his comrades for victory. The Jedi's enemy at the time were the dark side aligned Brotherhood of Darkness. And during the Ruusan campaign, Lord Hoth would basically destroy their entire movement and put an end to the Sith as we knew it. During the 7th and last Battle of Ruusan, Lord Hoth trapped Lord Shere Khan and the remaining members of his Brotherhood of Darkness in a cave system. This forced the Sith inside the cave to do something incredibly stupid and desperate. Instead of surrendering, they would use an ancient dark side ritual to create what's known as a thought bomb. Lord Hoth understood the dangers of this weapon and organized the majority of his forces to retreat while he entered the cave with a small group of volunteers in an attempt to stop Khan. Unfortunately, Khan does not listen to reason, and he launches his bomb anyway. This dooms him and the rest of his men, along with Lord Hoth and his men, to a fate worse than death. The energy and life inside of their physical bodies were sucked away, and their spirits would remain trapped inside the thought bomb for eternity. And all Lord Hoth really gets for his heroic attempt to disarm this bomb was an icy planet that no one really knows anything about. Well, I guess some people knew about Hoth. You see, Hoth was one jump away from the planet of Anoat, and that used to be the political center of the entire sector. That was before the entire planet was gassed by the Galactic Empire, forcing its inhabitants to leave, and those who remained would either die or be driven mad by toxins and become feral creatures known as lurkers. Bespin was also located just a few jumps away. They were famous for their Tibanna gas production. But other than that, people didn't really come to the Anoat sector for any reason. It wasn't a place you just passed through or anything like that. And plus, the locals in the Anoat sector would usually avoid the Hoth system because they knew there was really nothing there. Hoth was a relatively small planet at just 4,474 miles in diameter. That's just a little bit larger than Mars. It had a rotation period of 23 standard hours and an orbital period of 595 local days. Now, Hoth gets its frigid appearance because it is the 6th planet away from its own star, which means it's very far away from any heat source. It's also very close to the massive asteroid belt that ringed the entire sector. And this asteroid belt served as terrific camouflage for ships exiting or entering the system. Meteors would also routinely crash onto the planet of Hoth. This is how that Imperial Viper droid got through the Rebel scanners. It just pretended to crash like any other celestial object. For better or worse, the Rebels couldn't really see anyone until they were right on top of the planet. This is why Vader was really pissed off that Admiral Kendall Owlsel jumped the entire fleet right above the planet during the Battle of Hoth. But at the same time, it was relatively hard for the Rebels to see incoming ships as well. You see, Vader wanted the fleet to slowly enter the system outside of the asteroid belt, hidden from view. Anyway, being so far away from its star meant that Hoth's surface temperature could dip down to -60°C at night. Most of the planet's surface was covered in frozen ice plains, glaciers, and mountain ranges that were constantly being raked by freezing wind. And it's for this reason that most people didn't want to step foot onto this planet. You really needed some serious survival gear in order to even walk around during the daytime, and at nighttime, if you were stuck outside, you were completely screwed. Now, if you do look a little closer, there are some signs of life hidden on this planet. For instance, 33% of the planet's surface is actually covered in frozen oceans. This means there's some kind of heat below the surface, aka volcanic activity. The mountain ranges that dotted the planet points towards the fact that the crust is probably still moving and active, and there's probably a lot of volcanic activity as well. Around the equatorial region of the planet, you have these volcanic fissures that would go down hundreds of meters, even kilometers to the core of the planet. There's also enough humidity and atmosphere to sustain snowstorms, even though the temperature rarely got above freezing. But are there life forms on this planet that could, I don't know, be eaten and sustain the people that are operating this base? Well, upon first glimpse, it seems like the entire planet is lifeless.
Well, I finished my circle. I don't pick up any life readings.
There isn't enough life on this ice cube to fill a space cruiser.
You see that tauntaun that Luke is riding? There are actually 15 subspecies of tauntauns, and they all come from Hoth. The tauntauns were uniquely adapted for cold weather environments on this planet. These are strange beasts which had a layer of fur that was covering a layer of scales beneath. And it was one of the main preys for a large predator species known as a wampa. Wampas were semi-sentient mammals and carnivores, and they actually were intelligent enough to develop basic social circles. The establishment of Echo Base on Hoth actually displaced a small wampa clan that consisted of one adult wampa couple, 3 offsprings, and another single adult wampa male clanmate. The wampa patriarch had gone on a long hunt and was gone for several days when the rebels appeared. When the wampa returned, he would go on a killing rampage when he couldn't find his family. What's even more terrifying is that the wampa isn't really an apex predator. There are things that actually eat it, like the dragon slug. One of the reasons why the wampas really liked the cave system that they had found that would become Echo Base was the fact that dragon slugs would often get lost in the tunnel systems or get stuck. Now, the tauntauns were omnivores. They fed on small mammals like ice scrabbers and hoth hogs, but a big part of their diet and the beginning of the food chain was lichen and ice plants. Tauntauns were only adapted to daytime temperatures on the surface of the planet. At nighttime, they would actually find crevices or caves that were basically pathways deeper down into the belly of the planet where you could find volcanic fissures. It was in these areas that you'd see all the lichen and plant growth. And this is what sustained the tauntauns. And believe it or not, tauntauns could grow up to like herds of 25, which means there is enough food to sustain that size population. It's impressive for an icy planet. Hoth had a fragile ecosystem for sure, but it does exist. The fact that we see packs of omnivores like tauntauns and larger predators like wampas means that there's probably an entire world of creatures hidden beneath the ground. The nature on Hoth in many ways is as tenacious as the rebels who hide there. It would take the rebels about 18 months to complete construction of their base and set up a planetary shield system and generators. Ultimately, Hoth would be discovered by a fluke, an overly ambitious Imperial data analyst who just happened to see a Viper droid fly by the Echo Base planetary shield system. She identified the unnatural structures, and the rest is history. The rebels would have to go on the run again just a year or so after they first arrived on Hoth, but nonetheless, Hoth was an excellent world for a hidden base. It was dead and frozen from afar, and alive and vibrant beneath the surface. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed our video about Hoth. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.